and welcome to Tea and Strumpets, a Regency romance review. I'm Zoe.
And I'm Kelsey.
So happy Hanukkah to everyone who is celebrating. We didn't do this necessarily on purpose, but then we realized how serendipitous this was, that this episode is actually airing on the first day of Hanukkah. So Hanukkah starts tonight, December 10th, 2020. And that's exciting.
That is exciting. Look at our timing. We're doing super this year, Zoe.
Yeah. So hopefully this will help kind of get you in the mood or just be another little Hanukkah thing. Hanukkah's 8 days. So, you might be listening to this anytime in between. And I will admit right here up front that this story, while it is in a holiday anthology and, does have Hanukkah in it, it's not super Hanukkah heavy.
No, it's not super Hanukkah heavy. It's Hanukkah is mentioned.
Yes. It is. It's in there. But hey, so regardless, happy Hanukkah again. And I'm excited because this is going to be my first Hanukkah with our kid. That's weird. So we'll be starting to establish our own traditions as a family. And so that's really fun. The last couple Hanukkahs have just been like, we light the menorah and say a prayer and try to remember to do it every night. So again, it's going to be a very, very tiny kid, but maybe we'll find a new tradition or something a little bit more exciting. Definitely latkes.
That's so exciting because, I know it's a tiny one, but, I love family traditions, especially around the holidays. They just, make my heart happy. And it's
Yep.
weird. I'm not super traditional. I don't need to follow the rules all the time, but there's some things that I just love to follow. And I personally can't wait to establish my own family traditions. So I'm very excited for you establishing yours.
Yeah, so far I would say really our Hanukkah traditions are that I get out the Hanukkah bandana for our dog and I try to take a picture of her in front of the menorah later in Hanukkah where there's lots of candles on it. So anyhow, it's that's it so far. But
okay.
So we have a lot more to establish and I'm excited. So it'll be a nice celebration. And the book that we are talking about today with just a tiny mention of Hanukkah is from the anthology Holly and Hopeful Hearts. And it is called An Open Heart by Caroline Warfield.
Yes. So Caroline Warfield is the pseudonym of a writer who wishes she had walked through fascinating times in the shoes of one of her characters. But which one? Caroline has been at various times an army brat, a librarian, a poet, a raiser of children, a nun, a bird watcher, an internet and web services manager, a conference speaker, an indexer, a tech writer, a genealogist, and of course, a romantic. She has sailed through the English Channel while it was still mined from World War II, stood on the walls of Troy, searched Scotland for the locations of an entirely fictional castle, and found it, climbed the steps of the Parthenon, floated down the Thames from the Tower to Greenwich, shopped in the Ginza, lost herself in the Louvre, gone on a night tour of the Singapore Zoo, walked in the Black Forest, and explored the underground cistern of Istanbul. By far the biggest adventure has been her many, many years of marriage to beloved, a prince among men. Having retired to the urban wilds of eastern Pennsylvania, she reckons she is on at least her third act, happily working in an office surrounded by windows while she lets her characters lead her to adventures in England and the far-flung corners of the British Empire. She nudges them to explore the riskiest territory of all, the human heart. And we just wanted to mention that this is a Hanukkah book. However, our author is not a Jewish author.
Yes, in fact, she talks a little bit more about her nunnery times on her website, being a nun, and there's a great photo of her being a nun. And I did not know I did not know she was not a Jewish author until I read her bio. So I had read the book beforehand, and I think we're going to have some interesting conversations afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So anyhow, we have a history fact this week, and we're going way, way, way back, guys. We're going
way back
to biblical times because we're going to talk about the story of Esther and Xerxes. And we know him as Xerxes in kind of popular culture, but he has a different name. Ahasuerus is his other name. And so I'm going to do my best not to stumble as I say Ahasuerus a bunch of times in this story, because that's a little bit more proper here. But anyhow, the heroine of our book is named Esther, and to gain her attention, her suitor uses a costume ball to his advantage. He dresses up as the king from the Bible who married Esther for her beauty, despite the fact that Esther is Jewish, and helped the Jewish people of her time. However, as many biblical stories are, it isn't as simple as that. Esther is described in all versions of the Book of Esther as the Jewish queen of the Persian king Ahasuerus. In the narrative, Ahasuerus seeks a new wife after his queen Vashti refuses to obey him, and so Esther is chosen for her beauty. The king's chief advisor, Haman, is offended by Esther's cousin and guardian, Mordecai, and gets permission from the king to have all the Jews in the kingdom killed. Esther foils the plan and wins permission from the king for the Jews to kill their enemies, and they do so. Her story provides a traditional background for Purim, which is celebrated on the date given in the story for when Haman's orders were to go into effect, which is the same day that the Jews killed their enemies after the plan was reversed. So in the narrative, King Ahasuerus is drunk at a celebration of the 3rd year of his reign, and he orders his queen Vashti to appear before him and his guests in the nude to display her beauty. When she refuses to appear, he has her banished. You know, what a bitch, right? And seeks a new queen, and beautiful maidens gather together at the harem in the citadel. Upon the king's orders, Esther is taken to the palace where she is prepared to meet the king. Even as she advances to the highest position of the harem, perfumed with myrrh and allocated certain foods and servants, she is under strict instructions from Mordecai, who meets her every day to conceal her Jewish origins. The king falls in love with her and makes Esther his queen. And following her coronation, Mordecai learns of an assassination plot and tells Esther, who tells the king in the name of Mordecai, and then the king is saved. This great act of service to the king is recorded in the annals of the kingdom. However, after Mordecai saves the king's life, Haman the Agagite is made Ahasuerus' highest advisor and orders that everyone bow down to him. When Mordecai refuses to do so, Haman pays the king 10,000 silver talents for the right to exterminate all the Jews in the kingdom. And Haman does some supernatural stuff and decides that, you know, the 13th day of the month of Adar is a fortuitous day for the genocide. So using the seal of the king and in the name of the king, he sends his order to the provinces of the kingdom to allow the extermination of the Jews on that day. When Mordecai learns of this, he tells Esther to reveal to the king that she is Jewish and ask that he repeal the order. Esther hesitates, saying that she could be put to death if she goes to the king without being summoned, because that's the kind of world they were living in. But nevertheless, Mordecai urges her to try. So she goes to the courtyard in front of the king's palace and is welcomed by him, who stretches out his scepter for her to touch and offers her anything she wants, up to half the kingdom. And so she does a, kind of funny thing where she invites them to a feast, and then she invites them to another feast. And finally, when she kind of feels like he's buttered up, she tells him that while she appreciates the offer for half the kingdom, she must put before him a more basic issue. She says that there is a person plotting to kill her and her entire people, and that this person's intentions are to harm the king and the kingdom. And when Ahasuerus asks who this person is, Esther points to Haman and names him. So the king is now in a bit of a bind because Haman is his trusted advisor and Esther is his wife. So he finds a loophole, and basically, instead of taking back his orders that he's granted Haman to kill the Jewish people, he allows the Jewish people to rise up against their aggressors, and so they are saved by being able to at least save themselves. So there's also another weird little section of stuff with Mordecai that happens in Haman. But yeah, the Bible is weird and bloody, and it's a funny story. And it's also funny then that our character is like, I'm going to be this king that married you because my first wife displeased me because she wouldn't dance nude.
Well, she had to get her attention somehow.
It's a super cute moment in the book. Anyhow, so shall we move on to our main tropes?
Yes, we shall. So today our main tropes are tradition versus modernity.
Yep. I think that's really kind of the only one that I could super identify. What about you?
Nope, that was about it.
And our main characters are Esther Baumann and Adam Halevy. So now we're here in our synopsis. Shall we get going?
We shall. So Esther Baumann is delighted and excited because she, Jewish daughter of a banker, has received an invitation from a duchess to a house party. So excited, in fact, that when she returns home, she ignores the butler's subtle warnings that her father isn't alone and bursts into his office to tell him. Once inside, she bashfully realizes that he has business associates, but at his prompting shares her news. The men she isn't familiar with, both aristocrats, seem chuffed at her excitement and congratulate her on such an excellent invitation. But the man she does know, Adam Halevy, her father's protege, seems displeased at the news, which irks Esther to no end. Why was this man so judgmental of everything she did? Couldn't he just be happy for her? And why, oh why, did her heart have to do flips over such a frustrating, backwards-thinking man?
The men are preparing for a secret mission to get funds into France and across the Alps to Wellington. Although Esther isn't privy to the details of their mission, she knows that Adam will be doing something dangerous and will be gone for at least 6 weeks, so when he leaves, she wants to say goodbye. Their goodbye is fraught with something. There's obviously an attraction between the two, but Adam wants a Jewish wife who will respect and uphold the traditions of their faith and the subservient role of wife. Esther wants a husband who will not be so tied to the ways of the past, someone who is open to new ideas and happy to make friends outside their narrow circle. So they part as friends with words left unspoken because for now, there's nothing to say to make things work in their favor.
Adam travels with an aristocrat, Viscount Rockland, who defies everything Adam knows or thinks he knows about the aristocracy. The Viscount had been a soldier for a while and had no trouble sleeping in terrible conditions, doesn't grumble about food, and is insistent that Adam not use his title even in private, lest he forget in public and blow their cover. His attitude is challenging for Adam, who had strong conceptions about anyone outside his faith, particularly concerning prejudice against Jews. But the Viscount is simply a good-natured man, and Adam finds himself thoughtful through the journey.
They have a stopover in a French village at the foot of the Alps where Adam had spent some time previously. His friend and the local rabbi houses them for the night and helps them with the preparations for scaling the pass. It turns out that it is Hanukkah. They had lost track of time, so the two men spend the evening observing the holiday. At the Viscount's respectful observance and natural curiosity surrounding the traditions, Adam is almost charmed.
The journey is hard, but eventually they succeed in their quest and are able to return to England in a much more expedient fashion aboard another aristocrat's yacht. Adam has had weeks to think and grow. Conversations he's had along the way have made him realize that perhaps Esther has had the right of it all along. Perhaps they can respect and treasure their traditions while opening their hearts to others. And Adam's heart is telling him that he needs to convince Esther that he's changed so she will agree to become his wife.
Meanwhile, Esther has been working to convince her parents to allow her to go to this holiday party she's been invited to by a duchess. Her mother is too frail and her father too busy, but finally they convince her aunt to chaperone her. And so, something like 6 weeks after the invitation was issued, Esther goes to the party.
She is there when Adam returns. It is almost Christmas, but he knows that he cannot delay. What if she meets a handsome young man and becomes engaged at the party? So he sets off to the manor with a letter from Esther's father, who has given him permission to marry her. But Esther's father has also decided to come behind with a traditional matchmaker. Once the matchmaker makes the match between Esther and Adam, it's not something that Esther could easily get out of. So Adam knows he needs to ask Esther before the matchmaker arrives so he can call it off if Esther refuses him. He knows that this will be really important to her.
Esther is having a grand time at the party. Despite some light anti-Semitism from the guests, which might be described as insensitivity rather than anti-Semitism, she is mingling well and enjoying everyone's company. She's somewhat of a novelty to some of the guests, but her host is accepting and progressive and generally delightful, so that saves her from anything more odious than some giggling and light comments about her being Jewish. There's one man at the party who is a great catch and vaguely interesting, but then Adam arrives. Esther doesn't know how to feel about him, but she knows that she doesn't want to be caught alone with him, so she evades him privately for a few days while he stresses that the matchmaker will arrive.
Luckily, a masquerade ball is scheduled, and Adam has the excellent idea to dress as Ahasuerus to catch Esther's attention. The plan works, and she agrees to discuss things with him. Knowing he has to convince her of not only his feelings, but also that he's changed, he tells her this. I need to tell you I was wrong. It isn't easy for me. She stopped and rocked back on her heels, eyes wide. He let it all out in a rush. Rockland's friendship, Sarah's Hebrew, and Rabbi Nemani's advice. Keep an open heart, he said. I didn't understand what he meant at first, but he was right. You were right. I need to trust, to give people and ideas a chance. Ideas, she murmured. She looked baffled by his jumbled words. We can value our traditions without becoming so hidebound we can't allow change. We can hold on to our own customs and still value our friends.
And Esther says yes, just in the nick of time as her father and the matchmaker arrive. The party, though, continues, and while they're there, Esther and Adam are invited to demonstrate one of their traditions for the guests. They perform a Shabbat ceremony, and all the guests find the prayers to be extremely heartwarming. They also work on their ketubah, or marriage certificate, while they're at the party. Adam helps Esther translate the Aramaic it is written in, and together they make a few unconventional changes, including that their daughters will also be educated, and that Esther doesn't have to be his slave, basically. Esther is overjoyed that this man, who has made her heart thump so, has gone through this massive transformation of spirit and is willing to take their traditions forward.
And since Jews were exempt from the Hardwick Act, they don't have to wait for banns to be called. And they couldn't use a special license because Jewish custom required a 30-day period between agreement and their marriage. So they leave the party and a month later are wed joyously. Esther is delighted with all the clauses they've added to their ketubah and with the fact that Adam made a separate copy that she could sign as well. They finish our story with her mouth tilted in a wide smile. Anything you say, Adam. I plan to be a very submissive wife. He chuckled. I doubt it, love, but luckily I have a very open heart.
Aw, it was a cute last line. And with that, shall we adjourn to the parlor?
We shall.
We are going to be very quick today in the parlor and just remind you that we have all sorts of places and ways to get in touch with us, like social media, where we're on Instagram and Twitter at T as in Tom, N as in Nancy Strumpets, Facebook and Pinterest /TN Strumpets, and YouTube by searching our name. You can also find us on our website, romancepod.com.
And if you really want to be in the know, sign up for email notifications on our website. If you subscribe, you'll be the first to know what we're reading each month, plus you'll get all sorts of extras, including exclusive content from each of the authors who join us on the podcast. Our website is romancepod.com, and there you can find episodes, more information about us, and other resources, so take a look.
And finally, if you're feeling that holiday spirit, we would love nothing more than to receive a review from you. Reviews on Apple Podcast, Facebook, or anywhere else that you can review us really help other listeners find the podcast. And word of mouth is also one of the best ways that podcasts get found. So if you're not feeling like writing a review, but you like what you're hearing here, we would love it if you would tell a friend and spread the word.
Hi, I'm Jeff.
And I'm Will from the Big Gay Fiction Podcast. We're proud to be part of the Frolic Podcast Network.
Our show is for avid readers and passionate fans of gay romance fiction. Each week we bring you exclusive author interviews, book recommendations, and explore the latest in gay pop culture. We've talked to a wide range of authors such as Casey McQuiston, Adriana Herrera, Becky Albertalli, and Suzanne Brockman. TJ Klune has appeared a number of times on the show to tell listeners about his epic tales featuring werewolves, wizards, and drag queens.
New episodes are available every Monday. You can find us at biggayfictionpodcast.com and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. We hope you'll join us soon. Until then, keep turning those pages and keep reading.
All right, so let's talk about An Open Heart. It was a nice short novella.
Yes, nice and short. I thought it was very well written.
I agree.
And it had a bit of a Lifetime movie vibe to me.
Fair enough. I agree with that. And it's funny because my opinion really altered when I found out she wasn't Jewish. And it just made me think about things a little bit differently, because I think I took things for granted when I thought this was a little bit coming from more of a personal place. And then when I found out she wasn't Jewish, I wondered how much her experiences kind of were adjusted into the eyes of her characters. So I found a couple things that were a little bit uncomfortable when I started thinking about it that way, right? Which is, first of all, Adam's change, right? So Adam goes through this journey that really opens his eyes and makes him become more open and accepting. But what I wonder is, because I'm Jewish by heritage, but really not by I wasn't raised Jewish, right? So I feel like okay, cool, I'm Jewish. But if I wrote a book, I would have to research the ever-loving crap out of it. To have it come from a Jewish point of view. So while I'm excited to spend the rest of my life understanding my heritage more, I don't, and I feel connected to it. I don't actually also have that experience. I don't see things through that lens. So I do wonder about the amount of research that went into this book. And one of the reasons that I really want there to be more Jewish regencies is because I want to have more of a peek into what it was like for Jewish people back then. Yes, I understand it's fiction. I'm not expecting that, that historical romance has to be historically accurate 100% of the time. Absolutely not. But it does definitely give you a sense of things. And what happens when there's no Jewish books is it gives you the sense that there's no Jewish people during that time, or Black people, or, or anything other than white and Christian, right? So that being said, I kind of started to think, well, it's nice. It's a nice arc where Adam comes around and Esther's a little bit more progressive. And he's like, I want to teach our daughters. I want to teach you Hebrew, so that you can understand our, religious text and you can be more connected to it. And then you can raise our children to feel that connection. That is a lovely sentiment. I love that. But then I'm like, but what was the atmosphere really like during that time? This whole thing of him becoming more accepting, Jews throughout the ages have been persecuted, right? And had to hide their religion often because they could be killed for it. So I can understand people not being trusting of outsiders and not wanting to change any of their traditions because they've been forced to for so many years. So it kind of just put a little bit of a weird spin on that to me, where I was like, I want him to become more progressive, but I also don't want it to be like, oh, the world's not so bad, we'll be fine. It's just like, it was just weird. I don't know. How do you feel about it?
From a non-Jewish perspective, I personally thought it was, for me, it was just a lot more food of thought. I thought there was good research in the sense of looking at traditional Jewish things as far as not teaching women Hebrew and focusing on the education of the men, as well as how the marriage documents got signed and things like that. The matchmaker, all of that I thought was very interesting. And some of it I kind of knew, but I didn't know as much about. So that was really cool to see that happen. And I will say, as far as the open mind, I think our trope kind of fit in it perfectly. And I don't think it was a commentary about Adam needing to be more trusting and be the world's a merry place. I think it was more recognizing the idea of a non-traditional upbringing, which is what Esther had, because she was a girl and she was brought up in London, and her father he was a banker, so he worked with a lot of different people because he was a successful banker. So he had to work with a lot of different people. So he raised his daughter less traditionally versus Adam, who had been orphaned and then essentially raised by a rabbi, was very traditional. And it took the rabbi saying something for him to be oh, maybe I don't have to read this as so strict of the letter. Because the rabbi was oh, well, like, my daughter's actually better at reading Hebrew than the boys half the time. So, like, yeah, I taught her. There's no, like, rule against it. It's just not traditional.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that when I read it and thought about it, it just made me think all those things and made me wonder, a little bit more about it. Another place where I got a little bit uncomfortable, and I really did feel like this was uncomfortable, was when the Duchess asks Adam and Esther to perform a Shabbat ceremony for the guests.
Yeah, that was a little uncomfortable.
It feels like an exhibition, right? Like, oh, look at this exotic thing that my guests do.
Yeah.
And I don't think the author meant for it to be like that at all. I think the author was like, here's a way to show Shabbat to people who aren't, who don't know it. And that's where I think like her probably, what, if she's a nun, Catholic, Christian, Catholic,
but there's other types of nuns too.
Okay. That's where I think that her religious upbringing put her more in the people in the room's eyes, right? Which would be like, oh, how exciting to learn about something different. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I did find it like a little like, I was just like, because it was kind of very exhibitionist. It wasn't like they went off and were like, we're going to do our Shabbat ceremony. And a few of the people who they got close to at the party were like, we'd love to see what this is. Can we see it? Or something. But instead it was like, come, like everyone.
And it was very much like put on the spot too. The Duchess was like, she didn't ask them first. She basically was like, oh, by the way, it's this time of day. Do you like, for me, I think the scene she just kind of was like, do you guys want to show everyone? And they're like,
yeah.
But I also think that it was a way that, for me, I think that scene more, instead of like, it was a little bit exhibitionist, but I think the scene was more for showing Adam's growth, because the thing is, it wasn't Adam. Like, the Duchess asks Adam about it, and then Adam says, well, Shabbat is actually traditionally performed by the woman of the house. Like, so Esther, being a Jewish woman and knowing these prayers, like, will she, if she's willing to do it with me, then I'll do it. So I think it was more trying to show Adam's willingness to include Esther in things and not try to be dismissive of her. That was the purpose of the scene, but I agree. It was like, I was kind of like, ooh, that's weird. I'd feel very weird.
Yeah. And I mean, Shabbat, like, is, like you said, it's the woman, kind of has the bigger role in the ceremony, or the role in the ceremony. But, and I agree, it was like, it was meant to show Adam's development, but it was also weird because it's like, well, it just is like a women driven ceremony. So like, all he has to be is like, well, I can't do this. Like, he literally can't. It's not his role to do. It's against his religion to light the Shabbat candle. Yeah. So I was like, anyhow, it was just weird. So I definitely had this moment where it was just like, I now look at the book a little differently, and I question things just a little bit more, knowing that she's not coming at this from a Jewish perspective. I did say, like, well, how does that change what she's written? Do you know what I mean? Because I think I took it all at face value originally. And then once I learned that, I started thinking a little bit more critically about it. And I guess this is probably the first time that I, as a, cisgendered, straight, privileged white woman, have looked at, a book like this and thought as critically, and I feel bad because, we've talked a lot about, white authors writing Black characters, or, even, we sometimes talk about like, or we've sort of mentioned with like straight women writing gay romance,
Yeah.
And I think people can do beautifully. And I remember Kat Sebastian talked about having sensitivity readers and stuff when she wrote, a Black character. And I do think people can do good jobs. But I think that I think it definitely requires us to look at it just a little bit more critically when it's not. And I don't remember when this book was written, but it's not brand new. So it is possible that, she didn't have as many, sensitivity readers or those sort of things. And it just makes me wonder.
Yeah. And it could just be she saw a gap that she felt needed to be filled. And since no one else was filling it, she decided to fill it herself.
It's so true. No one else is filling this gap. It makes me very sad. So I'll be honest. Last year, when we wanted to do a Hanukkah episode, I was so sure I'd be able to find something. I mean, there's billions of books, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt lucky that I found that one that was published that year. And I will say right now, I think this was much better written.
Much better
that
written.
book, like way better written. I actually liked her writing. I thought it was quite good.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's this book and that book were the only two that I could find for Hanukkah Regencies. And I'm not saying that it has to be a Hanukkah. And then everyone is always like, oh, you've got to read Felicia Grossman. Like, she's great. But I'm like, but she writes her books are set in America.
Yeah.
So it's not that I'm not going to read them. I mean, they're on my TBR, like they're going to get read.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, we do have like a structure for the podcast,
yeah,
which says Regency in it. So it's a little hard to skip across the pond just at this moment when we still have so many books over here. So that being said, it makes me sad that there just aren't more. I want to see more. I want to, know more. And, we talked about this with B from The Ripped Bodice a little bit about Jewish women actually in history, right? Because of her book. So go back to that interview if you want to hear some of our thoughts there. But basically, I just wish there were more. And if anybody knows any others that I've missed, any Jewish regencies, please let us know.
Yes, please do. We want to read all the books.
So how about getting into the nitty-gritty of our hero and heroine?
All right. I appreciated Adam's journey.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed, he actually did go on a long journey. Long journey. And he really did have his perceptions changed quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure.
By meeting new people and doing new things, which is great. And then he came back and he kind of bungled things a little bit, but he was trying to do the best that he could.
Yes, I agree.
And that's my opinion on Adam.
I mean, I'm really the same. I was kind of surprised. The book, like the structure of the book was very different with all of a sudden, like you meet and your characters meet and then they're gone. They're apart for over 6 months. One of them like goes on a life-changing journey across the, continent. Yeah. And the other begs for 6 weeks and then goes to a house party.
Yeah.
But I agree. I liked Adam a lot. If I kind of just take him as he's written on the page and his journey and him as a character, I think he's a solid 7.
I'd give it that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, my kind of the hesitations of just the general, perspective of the book aside, I think that he has a good character arc and he is a nice character to read. He gives you a lot.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, you get a lot. I felt like I got more Adam from the book than I did Esther.
Definitely, which is fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely also because we get less of her, I don't know. She doesn't stand out to me as much.
No, I would agree. She's not a bad character. I like that she has some like very
conviction.
Progressive ideas, and she is an open-hearted person and she doesn't believe bad in people, but she also like, even when there's an annoying person, like she's not mean. She's like, and she is clever and she's not afraid to show her cleverness, which is actually partly why she got the whole invitation to the house party because the Duchess really likes her. And so she's good, but we just don't get as much about her and we don't really see the same growth in Esther as we did through Adam.
No, I mean, she starts at a much higher place, though, to be fair. Like, she doesn't need to grow as much. She just needs to trust. And so I think that's her journey. His is growth. Hers is, learning to trust that Adam. And she starts to trust it when she, gets that actual feedback from Adam that things are going to, he shows her that he has changed. But I didn't like that she ran away from him for so long, but I get it. It was for the reveal. Same
room, and then she's like, "And I'm going to avoid him for 2 days." It's like, cool.
Yeah, and it was for the reveal, for the masquerade ball, and I get that. It was to build up the tension, and it was fine. I don't know. I feel like she's a 6.5 to me.
I was gonna say 6. So
yeah. it just wasn't as strong and nor as interesting. And the running away kind of notched her down for me. So next, we're on to our favorite quotes. So what would be your favorite quote from this book?
So my favorite quote is one that I think kind of shows the writing, and this is after Adam has come to the costume ball and, gotten Esther alone.
Mm-hmm.
She couldn't move while his mouth descended towards her. She wondered distantly if she ought to refuse his kiss, but no power on earth could make her do so. The moment she had dreamed about, longed for, and denied since the moment he came to work for her father 3 years before had arrived.
Oh, that is a really nice one. And yeah, the writing really flowed and it felt natural. And I'm really glad that you chose that. Mine's a little bit more, a little kitschier, shall we say, because we referenced the title again. There was a few references of the title.
There were a few references to the title.
But I still really liked this. So it's during that same scene, I believe, it says, he ran a frustrated hand through his hair. I'm making a mess of this. Will you marry me, Esther? I can't promise we won't quarrel, but I'll do my best to listen to you. To keep an open heart? At the sweetness of his smile, she almost capitulated. Yes, that, he said. So, I don't know. I just liked that moment between the two of them where, like, she's saying no to him. She's like, no, I don't want to marry you. But then he's being open and honest. And he had explained that he learned that he's supposed to keep an open heart about things. And so,
yeah.
Anyhow, I liked it. It was a little kitschy, like you said, a little Hallmark movie-ish.
Yeah.
But also, like, you're just kind of like, oh, it's cute.
It was cute. No, it was cute. Everything about it. Like, it was very cute. Steamy, though, it was not.
No, that wasn't what this book was for. I'll give it that. It wasn't trying to be anything it wasn't.
No.
And
it wasn't. It's meant to be a cute book.
Yeah.
With some Hanukkah mentioned.
Yeah, for sure. And, like the characters have journeys, like they get to, all those things. They had chemistry. Like they definitely had chemistry, I thought, but not like
not
super,
jump out and grab you chemistry.
I just read another book that was like, and it was so different. But I appreciated we had 0 encounters. And I appreciated that we had 0 because if we had one, it would not have felt.
No, it wouldn't have worked.
No. So yeah, I felt definitely that this was what it was supposed to be. It didn't try to be anything it wasn't, which I appreciated.
Yes. And feminist recap.
I would say that this is a supporter. Again, like it's trying to show things from a different perspective. How successful it is at that, I'm still on the fence, But I feel like, Esther is a strong woman who's saying, I want to have my daughters be educated. And Adam comes around and realizes that that is a great idea. And so I think it's a supporter.
I think so too. And I think the Duchess is a very supportive character. You have very much like I would say Lucy's encounter with, yeah, but I would say like Esther's encounters with all the women in the book are all positive.
Yeah, I think there's 1 or 2 women that kind of snicker behind her back and about her being the Jewess and stuff.
But I think that was even like, she didn't even see who said it. It was like she heard it entering the parlor.
Yeah.
But like the only person that was like blatantly like being a weirdo was a guy. But she has her friends there, and the Duchess is like,
yeah,
oh yes, Esther is great. So
yeah, no, I think it's somewhere, it's trying to be progressive and show strong women and all those things. So I think it's good. Yeah. I don't have particularly strong feelings, I think, just because I'm also still like trying to digest how I feel about it in general. But we're at our final book rating, so I have to do something.
I mean, I don't know what I gave the last book we read, the last Hanukkah book we read. I'm going to give this one a 6, only because it was definitely better than the last one.
I agree. I also want to give it a 6. I wouldn't take it or leave it, this book. I think it's better than that. I think that it's interesting to read. And again, like, I want more books like this. I want more people writing books like this. So I really want, it to get read. That being said, I think I've expressed my kind of discomfort about some of the things or the perspectives. And, maybe I could research more or talk to the author and, find out some of those things about how she researched or why she did these things. But, I don't think I feel like 7 to me is good. And I feel like this is somewhere between okay and good.
Yes.
I do think the writing is very good. I think
the writing was great. I think that picking up another of her books wouldn't be hard because we know that the writing is very solid.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, that's where we're at. And I'm really glad we did read it because it, led to good conversation. And I'm just really hopeful that by this time next year, we'll have
another one to read.
We will have another one or maybe 2 even. Ooh.
Wow. That would be exciting.
So exciting. Yeah. So, what are we reading next time?
Next time, we are reading a Christmas novella.
Ooh.
And we are reading Meet Me in Mayfair by Tessa Dare.
Such a fun one.
Yes, super fun one.
And that's in the anthology, How the Duke Stole Christmas. So I know that it came out last year, but I'm still very excited for it. And we're going to have some other holiday novella recommendations for you during that episode because there are a few that came out this year that we didn't end up going with, but are super great options for getting your holiday novella fix.
Yes. Well, there's lots of great holiday novellas out there. So you could spend your whole month reading them.
Honestly, I'm sure many of us are. So thank you all for listening. And we would just like to say that if you want to get in touch with us about this book, about any book or any future book, we would love to hear from you. You can always shoot us an email at romancepod@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter or Instagram. We'd love to hear from you guys.
Yes, we do.
So thank you all again. Join us next time as we read Meet Me in Mayfair by Tessa Dare.
And may all your ever afters end happily.
Tea and Strumpets is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts.